Ah, I have access.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the second edition of Dog Talks, our new series where we have fun and interesting conversations with important people in the Access community. Today, we have the great pleasure of chatting with Mike Wolfe, a Microsoft Access MVP, a most valuable professional and a longtime Access developer, innovator, and the author of the No Longer Set Access blog, which is I would call it required reading if you are in the Access world, and we'll have a link to that later. We're delighted to have Mike with us today, and he is going to be talking about the use of AI in Microsoft Access. Mike, great to have you with us here at the Denver Group, and thank you for joining us.
George, thank you for the introduction and thank you for having me back. I know we've spoken one or two times in the past on some of the Denver Access user group meetings. So yeah, great to be here and looking forward to this format. So I've been an Access and SQL Server developer now since about 2007. Got out of the Army and went to work for a guy in my hometown. He's a one-man Access development shop, as many are, and so worked for him for about 7 or 8 years, and then he was retiring, and so I took over that business from him. So that was back in around 2015, 2016, that time frame. And at that time, we had really focused on Microsoft Access development. And at the same time, the software development world was starting to shift focus away from desktop applications and more towards web development work and away from things like Microsoft Access. There weren't a lot of new developers that were coming up and were excited to take on Access projects. Everybody that was coming out of college, they wanted to be working on the web or doing game design or things like that. So, from a business standpoint, I could see that the demand for Access developers would probably be going down over time, but that the supply of Access developers was likely going to go down even faster. And so rather than shift into web development work, we really doubled down on our Access development work. I started the nolongerset.com blog in 2020 in the middle of COVID, as everybody had their COVID projects. That was mine. And that was one that survived through COVID. I actually wrote an article every day on that blog for the first 3 or 4 years. And then eventually the grind got to me. My wife wanted to see me once in a while. And so, I'd had a pretty good corpus of material that I had written. And so went back to still publishing a weekly topic, Throwback Thursday, I call it, where I'll highlight some past articles that I've written, a Twin Basic update. So the Twin Basic project from Wayne Phillips, who is also the author of VB Watchdog and VB Mappy and some other tools that a lot of Access developers should be familiar with if they aren't already. And then, of course, we do a week in review article. And so every Saturday, I publish that, and then that goes out in a weekly newsletter. So if you want to keep up with all of the new Access content that gets released every week, and in fact, a couple weeks ago, I think we had a feature on there about the DAAUG, the first of these recorded interviews. So any new Access content over the past week, we highlight there. So yeah, I'd encourage anybody that's watching this video certainly to go check that out if you're not familiar with it already.
Yeah, that's an excellent resource. Really appreciate the work that you put into that. I didn't realize you had been writing daily for a few years. That's impressive, man. That's that military discipline sticking
Yeah.
with you, huh? That's great. That's great. I think it's interesting that, as you move forward with your plans for Grandjean Braverman, that you specifically said, "Hey, access is where we want to be." And I'm curious, do you feel like that's been a good decision? And how is the response from your clients when they find you been that you're out there doing this sort of support for these large applications?
Yeah, it's definitely been a good decision from a business standpoint. Probably the biggest struggle that I've had is to try and bring on new Access developers. And for a while, I went the route of trying to hire young computer science developers and programmers and then teaching them Access. And what happened for a lot of them is that um, I would spend a lot of time training them up and getting them proficient with Access. And they would say, I really don't think this is good for my career. And I honestly had trouble arguing that point. I knew it was the right decision for me as a business, but individual Access developers at that younger age, I don't know that it would be the best career advice. I have a future son-in-law who's majoring in computer science, and he's actually been interning for us for a few years, and so he's learning some Access, but he's also learning a lot of other things outside of Access itself. Um, but in terms of the clients that we've brought on, one good example, we brought on a client a couple of years ago, and they had a retiring Access developer. And before he retired, he told them what his plans were, and he said, "I don't think you're going to find somebody that's going to be out there that's going to be able to maintain this. So I'll put together an RFP with all the specifications that is in the system, and you should expect to pay at least 500K or more to have this rebuilt and all the data migrated into the new system."
Mhm.
And he had actually spent the time and money of putting all of that together for them. And before it actually went out to bid, he came across my website, and we have um, a page on the nolongerset.com site that's specifically geared towards retiring Access developers. So we call it long-term care for Access. And so he read that, and he had this moment where he said, "Oh, well, yeah, that's me. I'm a retiring Access developer. I've got a client that I really don't want to leave in the lurch." Um, and so um, they were thrilled um, to find out that somebody was going to be able to take over their application and maintain it for them. And so that's what we've been doing. About a year ago, um, well, really, whatever that Chat GPT moment was, that came out, and I started looking into it, and I said, this is not just going to be a flash in the pan. There's something here. Um, and so I was an early adopter with AI and trying to do as much of it as I could, and trying to push the envelope, while at the same time being aware of the dangers and the pitfalls of relying too heavily on it. Um, and so um, what we've done is we've um, tried to take advantage of the productivity gains that come from using AI, but also put guardrails around it. And for me, that's been a really enjoyable challenge of trying to balance those two competing interests.
Yeah, long-term care. It sounds like palliative, assisted living for Access or something like that. But it's interesting because, at Access, it's such a great tool for so many things that it's like the guest that would never leave, the zombie, it keeps coming back and stronger and so I think it's great that you and other companies like Winning Solutions, whom we've spoken with recently, and others are specifically, seeking to meet the need for all these mission critical applications that are out there that would cost I think, as you mentioned, $500,000, $1 million to port to another platform. For a fraction of that, it can just be continued to be supported. And I assume you add features and do other enhancements.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big part of what we do as well is to modernize that. So, a lot of times what can be a great interim solution and even a long-term solution is to have a hybrid where, there are oftentimes aspects of the application, some read-only data that you want to be able to share outside of the organization, have some kind of a public web interface.
Right.
And so you can expose some of that data on the web, but still keep access for what its real strength is, which is that back office data entry and maintenance. It's always, I'm also an advisor on a couple of clients that are going through modernization projects with large complex access applications and moving them into a web framework. And the first thing that they see when they see the new interface is, oh, it's so nice and clean, the web interface. There's all this extra white space, so it's comfortable to look at.
Yes.
And then they realize that that's a double-edged sword, right? Because in Access, the thing that you could do like 10 things on one screen, and now to do that same thing on a web form, it's a wizard thing, and you're filling in a few things here, and then you're going to the next page, and then you're filling in a few more things, and you don't have all that data. You don't have that same sort of data density on a typical web application that you have with Access. And so,
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I know for the last, decade or so, give or take, of my career as a developer consultant in Access, so much of it has been exactly what you talked about, keeping the back office, the admin interface, the management stuff, the internal LOB stuff in Access, but providing, external web interfaces or API hooks or Power BI reporting or things that would be impossible or very difficult to do within Access. But once you kind of break those walls a little bit, say even if it's just with a SQL backend or a Cloud SQL backend, all sorts of horizons open up to meet the needs of a client. Now, one of the things I haven't done is use much AI in Access, and so today, and just to let folks watching know, this may very well be a part one of two. So hopefully we'll be able to have Mike back to dive down into some details of what we're looking at today. But Mike, maybe just spend 15-20 minutes going over some of the, get us over the hurdle of how do I even use AI in Access and what do I use it for and what does that look like? So would you please run us through some examples of that?
okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use the Access contacts sample template, and I've already got that downloaded. So I'm going to run that separately here. Okay, so we've got just a basic contact database. Doesn't really matter. We just need to have something to be able to demonstrate. So if we look at this database right now, and I think what I probably should do is move it into its own folder just so that we've got a better place to take a look at it. So and you'll see why we're going to do that in a minute. So right now, this just got created in my user documents folder, but instead I'm going to put that. I keep all my repositories in a folder, and one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to put this database under version control. So I know not a lot of Access developers use version control. If you've developed in other languages, it's a lot easier to use version control. The main reason is that the version control system wants to keep track of individual files. And a typical Access database is just a single binary file, and all the forms, all the reports, all the code modules are in that one file. So there's not really anything to compare it to. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to open this up, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to break this down into the individual components and export them as text files. And what we're going to be using for this is Adam Waller's MS Access VCS add-in, and I think George can put a link in the notes. He actually interviewed Adam a couple years ago, and he demonstrated how this works. But we're going to skip the install steps and just go right into showing you how this works on a new application. So this is a common scenario where we have an existing application that we're taking over control of. So the first thing that I would do is I would put it under source control. So I open it up, the front end, and I'm going to go to export the source files. And what it's doing is it's taking all of those files, and if we go back into this folder now, it created a source folder. And so inside here, we have all the forms, and the forms are separated into 3 different kinds of files. This has, I believe this one has the source code. Yeah, it's going to be the one that has the source code. The .form file is one that's going to have all of the layout information. Let me just bring over that from my other screen so you can see that. This is all the layout information. And this is a proprietary format. There's a hidden save as text undocumented method that lives in VBA. So you can do a save as text, and it will export to a single file all of this information as well as any code behind. Part of what the VCS add-in does is it breaks that apart into 3 different files. This separate JSON file includes information that is otherwise stored as binary information during the save as text export. So the printer settings, the print margins, things like that. Okay, so we've got that in there. So now we've got all the files in here, and for now I might skip the version control part of it to try and keep this as simple as possible. What I want to focus on for this session is trying to get you to a point where you can play around with AI and get a lot of value out of it with 0 risk. So that's the main thing, trying to keep it so that it's 0 risk, and that you're doing you're getting maximum value. And once you get a taste of it, then you're just naturally going to want to do more and more. So, think of this as, I'm your dealer and this is the first free hit or something, a little more wholesome if you'd prefer. All right. So the next tool that I'm going to use, we use, there's a handful of different tools. The one that we're using is Claude Code from Anthropic. We have a team account. With the team account, you can get standard and premium subscriptions. The standard subscription is $20 a month if you pay annually, and the premium is $100 a month if you pay annually. If you're a full-time developer, that's the best $100 a month. Like the value that you get out of that, it's hard to put it into words. So I'm not going to go through the full step-by-step setup as far as signing up for the account and doing all of that. We're going to fast forward to the interesting parts. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is, I suppose I should give a little bit more context than that. You're going to open up VS Code after you sign up for your account with Anthropic. And I should point out that Visual Studio and VS Code are two different applications. There's some confusion over that within our team, actually. One of the new developers, we do a weekly AI session. And so for what we're doing, this is VS Code, so separate application. You're going to come into the extensions marketplace, and we're going to grab Claude Code for VS Code, and it should show that it's published by Anthropic with the blue check mark there. I don't know what any of these things are, but I'm not about to throw in a Claude Code YOLO with 42,000 downloads, and who knows what it's doing. We're going to go with this standard one, and I've already got it installed. Okay. So from here, what we want to do is we want to provide that context to the AI. And so the easiest way to do that is to open the folder that all of our source code just got exported into. So we're going to go into here and contacts, that's what I called it. And I'm actually going to do it at the top level. Okay, one of the things that the VCS add-in does, in addition to exporting all of the individual files, is it creates this other file that's called agents.md. Now, MD is a markdown file, and markdown is sort of the lingua franca for AI agents. What's really nice about it is it's a markup language, so we can have it rendered in a nice human readable form, but it adds very little additional, there are very few additional characters that get added to just the pure text. So it's not much, adds maybe like 1% additional character weight to a text file, but you get some nice rendering. So what this is doing is this is basically telling your agent, whether that's Claude or if you're using Cursor, and I would recommend using one of those two at the moment. Microsoft Copilot is available, but at the current state of things, I think Claude and Cursor are probably your two best bets if you wanted to get started in this. So it's just explaining what these files are. It's providing context to the agent, because when we run our first session, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to look for this file, and it's going to read it, and it's going to use that file to orient itself to the database. Okay, so we've exported our files, our Access objects, and we've got the Claude Code extension. It's running in VS Code. We've added the folder that has all the source files in there. And now we're going to open our first chat window. So we're going to come up here, and we're going to open this little orange splat, and that's going to open up a Claude Code window. All right. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to run a command, so a slash command. So there's a bunch of commands that are built in, and then additional commands that are known as skills that you can write. So the first one we're going to run is this init command. And if I hover over it, okay. So it's going to initialize a new claude.md file with code-based documentation. So this is it, just slash init, and then I hit enter. And what it's going to do is it's going to start by reading that agents.md file, and then it's going to read through this entire project, and it's going to orient itself. It's going to learn about how the project works. It's going to identify any particular coding conventions or different standards, any kind of gotchas that are unique to this code base. What it's not going to do is not going to repeat information that it could find by reading an individual source file. But if there's something that's critical that it thinks that the agent needs to know, it's going to include that. So whenever you start a new session, it's going to read this agents.md file. It's also going to look, in the case of Claude, for a claude.md file. I have not used Cursor extensively. I assume that it has something similar. It might have the exact same name. There's a lot of shared usage across these tools currently. Anyway, so it's going through, and as it's doing this, we can kind of read what it's doing. So it's using different tools to, right now it's starting by listing all the files in the repository root. And you can click on this, it's going to show you, what the results of that command were. So it listed the files, and now it can see this is everything that's in there. And it's going through, and it's reading the files one at a time. And it's actually, let me amend that. It's not reading them one at a time, it's reading them in parallel. So the way these modern tools work is that they typically have a high-level agent that then orchestrates sub-agents automatically. And so that'll go out, and this is why it's able to read even a very large, complex code base. It can read through it and understand it very quickly because it's doing it in parallel, and it's not having to reread the entire code base every single time. It's doing this first pass that's going to help it orient itself in the future. Okay, so it's giving us just a recap of what it found. And so it created Claude at the repo root. This is the classic Access contacts template database, exported to text source today with the VCS add-in, version 5.0.1. It covers the 3 root items. It has, let's see, workflow instead of build commands, so there's nothing to run from the command line interface. So that's one of the things that it's looking for in a typical language. You have some way that you can build the final deliverable, the executable. So one of the first things it does, it wants to learn how to do that, and in this case, it can't currently. All right, and then a pointer to the add-in's own agents.md, some big picture architecture. Okay, so it noted that the folder is not under version control. Okay, so that's going to be especially important if you wanted to have it do any development work and write code that you're going to bring into your database. For me, that's kind of a hard line. I do a lot of work. I let the AI write code, and I've gotten to the point where I don't even read most of the code that the AI writes, which is a more interesting topic for another day. But before you get to that point, it's more of a crawl, walk, run type progression. And so we're really in that phase where we're just going to be using things as read-only. And we have the extra protection being that this is an Access database, that none of these text files are read at all by the Access database. The only way that we could get that information back in would be to import it. And so that's part of what this version control tool does. You can then rebuild your application from source. You can do a merge build, which will just bring in the changes, or you can load just an individual file. But for this first session, we're going to start purely read-only. George, do you have any questions at this point before I?
Yeah, no, so kind of the high level sequence is that so get the version control add-in, Adam Waller's VCS add-in, and then export your Access project into these text files, export the source files, and then you open up Visual Studio Code, which of course is a free development environment from Microsoft. Make sure you have the Claude add-in from Anthropic there, and then basically just set it loose on these source files that have been exported still in Visual Studio Code by running the init command. And that's sort of basically created I guess not only does it document, but it sounds like what what you're saying is it gives Claude the context for the application as it currently is. So it now has sort of this understanding of what the application is all about. So maybe now, excuse me, in terms of what are a couple of quick things we can do now that we have Claude aware of what our Access application looks like.
Yeah, so now this is where if we were taking over a new application, a lot of times we could start asking it how the thing is supposed to work. Now, contacts database is pretty straightforward, but so I'm just asking it a sort of a natural language question about the application itself. So if I wanted to add a new contact, what are the steps to do that? And so you can kind of, what can be interesting as you're doing this is to follow along and see how it's identifying some of these things. So you'll see it uses grep a lot. So if you're familiar at all with Linux, grep is a search command, a find command. And this is where the other kind of key way that you can work with Access and AI is to use the Access MCP project, which just came out a few months ago. And I include updates to that project in the Week in Review article that I publish. And what that does, it works a little bit differently. So the Access MCP server works by the AI basically goes through the Access MCP project as a middleman, and it'll ask it questions, and then that MCP server will go through and it will return those answers, and it will also do editing and other things within your project. So there's a few things you need to be careful of. One, with that Access MCP project, it will make changes to your front end. It'll make changes to your code. Even if you are, careful about telling it not to do that, it will sometimes do it anyway. And it'll, after the fact, say, "You're right. You told me not to do that. I'm sorry." So it'll apologize to you. So one of the things that I've learned working with AI is that you really don't want to be in a position where you're relying on the explicitness of your instructions to protect something. You want to have structural safeguards in place. So in this case, it's not doing anything. It's not going in and it's not editing the ACCDB file in any way. So structurally, there's no way, like even if it went through and deleted all of the exported source files, we still have the original application.
Now, could you actually add a new table, let's say, here into the source files and then subsequently import them back in using source control, or?
Yeah, so you could do that using the VCS add-in, and technically speaking, you wouldn't even need to have it in source control. That
Okay.
said, I wouldn't want to put anything in. The first thing I'd do, going back not quite 20 years, but about 18 years, I started using version control because it was the first time I had done a lot of work in Access, and I had broken something. It was a subtle bug that I had introduced. It was the developer I was working for had used this technique in VBA where it was a null comparison, and so it would do like this check, and it would say if this then blank else all of the code, and I was like, oh, he's doing that wrong. I'll just change it to not. I'll get rid of this else, and I'll just clean it up. And I did that in like a dozen different places. And then he saw me do it one day. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just cleaning it up for you." He's like, "No, I was there because of how null gets evaluated as a Boolean, I said, oh. He's like, well, where did you change? Where else did you change it? I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
I said, we've got backups, but I wasn't going to go through 100,000 lines of code and find, there's no way to find that. And so I said, all right, well, there's got to be a better way. And so if I
Yeah.
had version control, I could have easily said, what are all the things that I've actually changed? And I could go back to the days that I changed them. And
Yeah.
so version control has value all by itself,
All
but
by itself. Yeah, I mean, the old school way of you have a cop you have like 2,000 copies of access of the
and that's what we
application,
had.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But to know which I realized that really wasn't all that helpful if I wanted to find that level of detail.
Yeah. Okay.
Where are we at time wise? Because I can talk
Yeah,
about this.
let's sort of wrap it up with something interesting to kind of show us maybe one more aspect of using AI at this level, and then we'll go ahead and plan for a second version of our chat uh,
Yeah. So
in the future. So yeah, go ahead.
let me showcase. So this is, to this point, everything I've showed is sort of built-in functionality. That's pretty easy. But I'll give you a taste of some of the things you can do. So I built a custom skill, and what this does is it creates documentation for an individual access object. So if I say document, and I want it to do the contact details form. So all that skill, that this idea of a skill is, see if I can just bring up the actual file. Well, we'll wait for it to, oh, there it is. Access documenter. Okay, so while it's running, we'll just hit the high level features of what this does. So this generates standardized documentation for Microsoft Access objects. And what I wanted to do when I took over another person's application, after we get into version control, the next thing we try and do is set up a development environment where we have a copy of their data so that we can kind of play around and not worry about breaking anything in production. And so one of the things I wanted to know is what things are safe to do and what things are not safe to do. And so I came up with sort of this idea, this badge system of what things are safe to test. And so something that is purely read-only that gets a green tag. There's no side effects. If it's local only, so like a temp data, or it's writing to your local hard drive, then that gets a different badge. Now, if it's writing to a backend database, either through ODBC or ADO, it uses either the yellow or the orange badge. And these, in my mind, are somewhat interchangeable. So typically speaking, if I'm connected to development data, and I'm developing, then these things are all pretty much safe to do. If I'm on the client system and maybe I'm doing a screen share and I'm helping them with something, these are things that I'm going to be a little bit more careful about because it's going to be touching production data. This last one is a red badge. And what I wanted to do there is highlight anything where it could be hitting an external resource. So even if I'm running a local copy of the application and I'm connected to development data, I don't want to accidentally send out 5,000 emails to actual customer email addresses, because it just happens to be calling an API and passing it all of the customer email data. So okay, so here's it generated the documentation and it created 2 files. So the first time that this skill runs, there are instructions to create a README that documents all of the conventions. So because this is the project's first documented object, and then the actual form documentation. And then it's giving me a summary here. So I'm going to show you the file that it created first. And it creates it alongside the actual file. What I'm doing, I'm hitting F1 because I've done this a few times now. When you hit F1 in VS Code, it brings up this command bar where you can type in commands. And so these markdown files, these MD files, if you start typing in markdown, there's an open preview. And so that's what I've been using here. Right. So it goes through, it shows all of the controls on the form. It has the control name alongside the label and the caption. So if I bring these up side by side and open up the contact details form, you can kind of see it's showing all these different things. So there's the go-to contact. So this saves the current record if it's 30, then navigates to the selected contact. We don't have any contacts in there yet. Save and new, it's telling me this stuff. So here's that red badge that I talked about. So if I were to hit the email button, it's going to open a new Outlook message addressed to the contact. And it's going to do it in edit mode. So the user must click send. So that's a good thing to know. This is going to write the contact into the user's Outlook address book. And then it also includes the key down here so that I don't have to go searching for it when I need it. Now, just generally speaking, the way that I created this skill was by telling Claude Code that I wanted to create a skill, that I wanted to do this thing, and I wanted to do it regularly. So what one of the articles I wrote about recently is this idea of deterministic code versus probabilistic code. And so the distinction being, if you've got a script that you're writing, generally speaking, without getting into the real technical weeds, that's going to be deterministic. You're going to run that script and it's always going to produce the same output. Mm-hmm. When I ask the AI to create this contact details form, it's going through, and if I were to delete this and have it created again, it would be similar to this, but it wouldn't be the same. Every time it creates it, it's going to be a little bit different. Mm-hmm. And depending on what you're trying to do, that can be good or bad. Probabilistic processes are things that work better when they need to be flexible. Like for me to write a script that would deterministically go through and say, all right, how do we want to handle this control? And then, describe what the action is. This is something that really benefits from being probabilistic. Mm-hmm. And when I did this the first few times, I was just saying, tell me about this form. And I was kind of giving it all the instructions that live in what's now the skill. So, I had it go through and I had it build this documentation for me the first time. And then I said, all right, this is something I'm going to want to be able to do again and again. So save it as a skill. And then over time, I refined it so that, for example, one of the refinements, one of the iterations was adding this cheat sheet, if you will, at the bottom. So anyway, you can really, what we showed here was just a single form. So we didn't even really get into some of the more powerful aspects of it and the fact that it has access to your entire code base and the context there. But hopefully this is a little bit of a taste. And what I would hope is anybody that's watching this would at least go through the steps and try and play around with it a little bit, because your job's not going to be taken by AI, but it will be taken by people that get proficient in it. So you want to be one of the ones that's proficient in it.
Oh, this is great. Thank you. It's interesting to see the the beginnings of this interaction of Claude with the Access database in terms of generating documentation and describing the various objects that are in the database. I know that in the future, we plan on taking a look at build merges and automated tests, which I think is especially interesting, I think, for Access developers. How can we play in this sort of test-driven development or the use of build tests or check-in tests or automated tests, which is again something that traditionally I don't think has been done a lot in the Access environment. So we'll look forward to doing that hopefully in part 2. And Mike, I want to thank you again for taking the time to give us this introduction. And we had a lot here. We had the VCS add-in for source control. I'll put a link to that video below in the description of this video, also to Mike's nolongerset.com blog. And then we'll hopefully have the chance to chat again on doing some more interesting stuff with AI and Access and source control. So thank you again, Mike, for taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, no, thank you, George. And I'll throw in a quick pitch for any of the UK developers out there, or anybody that wants to have an excuse to plan a trip to London. I'll be presenting in November in person there on using Git and version control with Access as really a precursor to a lot of the AI assisted development. It really is kind of a hard requirement when you want it to start writing its own code and updating your own applications.
Excellent. Well, there you go, guys. Head off to London in November. You can catch Mike with more details on using the source control add-in for Access. Thank you again, Mike. Great to see you and to chat. Thanks so much for this great information. And thank you, viewer, for joining us for the Denver Area Access User Group DAAUG Talk with Mike Wolfe on source control and AI. And Mike, we'll see you soon. And thanks again for joining us today. Bye for now.
Thanks, George. Bye.
Thank you.